Welcome to True Crime Boss. I'm Jarrett Ferrantino. What's next in the prosecution of Bryan Kohberger, ladies and gentlemen? We've covered at length the demolition of the house, the motions to get the grand jury indictment tossed. The prosecution has asked for a trial date in late June. What's coming next? Where are we going in this prosecution, folks, and what can we expect? We have covered at length the motions, the evidence, the affidavit. Now we're going to telegraph exactly where the prosecution and the defense are headed. Right now, we can forecast what's coming in the month of January. The court has scheduled a hearing on another defense motion. What is that defense motion and what is it all about? The defense has asked Judge. You would remember Judge is the name of our judge, and an esteemed colleague of mine, Eddie Saramboli, had said, just say Judge squared. That's easier. And I thought to myself, I don't understand math. Maybe my audience doesn't understand math. We're not as versed in fractions and exponential numbers as Eddie. But if it's easier for you, Judge squared. Judge right now has motions on his desk from the defense team of Bryan Kohberger. And I want to cover two major points. Number one, there's a motion for reconsideration of the motion to dismiss the grand jury indictment. That's a mouthful, folks. Essentially, they're asking Judge Squared to revisit his decision in denying the defense motion to dismiss the case. If you want to know all about that motion, we covered it in our last episode. But this particular motion is simply saying, Judge, we disagree with your ruling. We're asking you again, please reconsider. It's like a child asking a parent to go out and they're being told no, asking the same thing again, expecting a different answer. You may think to yourself, that seems pretty stupid. And quite honestly, it is. But in the law, there is a vehicle for reconsideration to give the judge another opportunity to assess this particular motion and write an opinion, because that's where we're headed, folks. On the second motion currently on Judge's desk, there is a motion to stay the proceedings and a motion for the judge to allow for an interlocutory appeal. Folks, these motions aren't as sexy as what's been discussed in the past and all the sort of details in the defense's strategy in this case. However, folks, what the defense is asking for is significant. They're saying, Judge, these matters regarding the grand jury are so important. We're asking you to stay these proceedings. And what does stay the proceedings means? That means stop the prosecution of Bryan Kohberger, literally pause these proceedings, and give us the opportunity to go to the appeal court above you and ask to have these very legal issues heard. Folks, let's break this down. A stay in these proceedings. You know, I have watched the victims' families in their interviews and the statements they have made. Everyone is frustrated because this process takes so long. And I saw Mr. Gonsalves talking about how it's been a year and we haven't gotten to trial yet. Folks, I have done my share of capital murder prosecutions. They take a very long time, and these families need to be prepared that these cases do take an awfully long time. And these motions that are currently pending, and the fact that the judge is being asked to stay these proceedings so the defense can go to an appeals court, are significant. You will remember, Judge was saying to the defense attorneys, I don't have the authority to do what you're asking me to do. That comes from a higher court. You can bet the defense is going to say, Judge, you agreed with us. You couldn't give us what we're asking for. It would have to come from a higher court. And he called their arguments interesting. But my prediction is the arguments they're making with regard to grand jury indictments, They are interesting and they're thought-provoking. They're not going to carry the day. And judge can dismiss this. And if he does not allow for that interlocutory appeal to go forward, then the proceedings against Bryan Kohberger will move forward. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean the judge has to give the defense permission to appeal? Yes. If he doesn't, can they file for an emergency appeal or appeal his decision not to give them an interlocutory appeal? Yes. But I could tell you this, those appeals courts in Idaho, they're watching this and they're going to rule on those pretty quick. You know, across the country, we're getting pretty versed on appeals courts with the Trump prosecutions and how quickly these things can happen and how these appeals courts swoop in and make rulings quickly so they don't get tied up in some kind of a procedural quagmire, which is where a lot of cases have ended up. I am going to assure you, ladies and gentlemen, and the Gonsalves families and everybody out there, even if we get through this particular pending motion, we still have a long road to trial. What's next in Idaho? I'll tell you, folks, what's coming in Idaho is the most intriguing and interesting component of the prosecutions to date. The defense will be filing a fury of motions will be coming. They're called Omnibus pretrial motions. You can bet the defense tried to cut the grand jury indictment into ribbons. They are going to challenge every piece of evidence that's been gleaned thus far in this prosecution. We start with the affidavit. All the evidence that was in the affidavit, and we've discussed it, the cell phone evidence, the DNA, the touch DNA that was taken from the Knights Chief button, the identity that was made, or the physical description that was provided of Bryan Kohberger, the identity of his vehicle, all of that information. I love when people tell me, you know, they don't put all the information they have in the affidavit. That's someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, folks, just so we're clear, okay? Every bit of information they had on Bryan Kohberger last December was in that affidavit. They were grasping to get every fiber of information in until they got a confirmation on that DNA and hit him for the arrest. So if anybody tells you that, that's not someone you should give a great weight to what they're telling you. So we start with that evidence. The defense is going to try to knock that evidence out in a various different ways. They'll attack the warrants that some of the evidence was secured with. And in those omnibus motions, here's why they're so interesting, folks. First of all, it's compelling law. It's compelling argument. It's a test of our constitutional rights as citizens, as Bryan Kohberger as a defendant, and our four beautiful victims in this case. However, we know there's a gag order in this case, and there is an abundance of information that the parties know that we don't. We don't know it. So what's going to come out in these motions? As the defense asks to quash or dismiss certain pieces of evidence, they're going to have to let out certain facts that aren't public yet. They're going to have to attach to their motion reports that the public has never seen before. For example, what if Bryan Kohberger actually ordered the knife from Amazon and there was a warrant served on Amazon and the defense is trying to quash that particular piece of evidence? The only way to get that dismissed and that evidence suppressed, folks, is to file this motion and file it publicly. And that's not a violation of the gag order. It's the defense attorneys doing their job. So you can bet when those motions are filed, everyone, including myself, are going to be poring over those documents, looking for new information that has not been made public yet. Two other things that have come out. There supposedly was a purchase of a $49.99 work uniform at Walmart, a Dickie work uniform by Mr. Kohberger. You can bet that the prosecution has tried to run that information down through Walmart. If that's the case, we may learn, in fact, that that item does exist. And these confirmations can come from these pending omnibus motions. So what is coming in the prosecution of Bryan Kohberger is a flurry of defense motions. And that is where the rubber meets the road as far as fighting on the merits of this case.